Welcome everybody to Project You, Project Me, the FTG guide to self-belief and self-coaching. Why not come along and listen to people like you, people like me, leaving legacies for your future. So welcome everybody to Project You, Project Me, removing your fear with the FTG. And today we've got a top quality individual that left the military a little while ago, Matt Braithwaite. So how are you, Matt?
I'm all right. Not too bad, John. Yourself?
Yeah, all good, mate. And I've seen a lot of interesting conversations that you've been having and things you've been putting on LinkedIn, which kind of brought us together, having a few conversations about lots of things transition. But before we kind of start, and we'll get into a little bit of nitty gritty, and we're going to go down some different avenues today about retention and things like that. But just tell us a bit about yourself, Matt, you know, what you served in, when you left, what you've been up to, that kind of stuff.
So I've been in the army and the navy. I served in the Royal Dragoon Guards from '98 to 2004. I then went in the submarine service because of there'd actually been an exchange. They did an exchange between like members of the regiment went over to go on one of the escorts, and the submarine service sent people over to us. So it was something that had interested me, and I'd spoken to my friend who'd been away. And so when I'd left, I'd kind of transitioned. I'd drawn straight from school, so I didn't really know anything else, and left after like 6 years, which the point we can discuss later. And I transitioned. I was working in the factory, and little things like that. And I just, it wasn't a mistake. I was based in Germany at the time. We were going to be in Germany for like 15 years. All my mates were kind of finishing college, finishing uni, and I just felt like I was missing out. And that just wasn't the case at all. But ultimately, when it comes to life, you've just got to paddle your own canoe, and you've got to work these things out for yourself. So then, when I realized I wanted to go back in and I wanted to go back in submarines, the process was it wasn't an easy process. It was quite difficult, and I had to go through a lot of interviews, and there was a lot of stuff to work around. But I did go back in, and thankfully, I had some great times in the army and the navy. That could be a separate podcast by itself. But I left the navy in 2014. At the time, there was all sorts going on. I'd actually retrained to be an NDT technician, utilising rope access and stuff like that, offshore survival. But at the time, the oil and gas industry had just collapsed. It was a really difficult time, so I had to pursue other avenues of employment. That in itself, it's just all part of the journey. Sometimes your journey might not go the way that you think it will, but it's not a success or fail kind of environment, I don't think, or it shouldn't be. It's just you've got to do what works for you at the time. And as long as you've got, the interests of, yourself, your family, maybe, at heart, then, you're always going to win. Just paddle your own canoe, try and make the right kind of decisions that are right for you at the time, and just try and make progression. Perfection doesn't exist. It may seem it, you'll look at it, you'll see it being displayed apparently on social media and stuff like that. The perfect lives out there, you don't know what kind of life anyone is really living. So, don't go down the route where you're comparing yourself to other people. Yeah. It's not productive and it's not effective. That I've been outside since 2014. I've had a lot of different roles, and they're based around kind of technical service engineering field. But I've realised myself that I wanted to go through a career pivot. I want to utilise my management experience, and also getting into sales, which I've done quite a lot of in the technical roles I've been in, upselling, cross-selling products and things like that. It really interested me. And there's one thing that I do know is that you need to be interested in what you're doing. You don't absolutely need to, but it helps. It helps you add value, to your own life, and it can be a real driving force that can lead to happiness. And ultimately, that's what we're all after, I think, John. It's just being happy and learning how to allow ourselves to be happy. So then, that's where I am. I'm in a career pivot. I'm still looking for work, but I think the key is mindset. Understanding that we're all growing all the time. There isn't really a stage in your life where you think, right, this is me, I'm a finished product. That's it. If there is, great. I'm not saying that can't exist, but just understanding what life's about, that it's a journey, and that as long as you try to make just little steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
That's winning in my eyes.
I agree with you. I think I'm probably about 5% of what I need to be. I don't take any day for granted. I don't take anyone for granted. Because I know that, just like that, this can all come tumbling down. So um, I'm always trying to grow. I never ever think I'm better than anybody else or anything like that. So it's kind of wise words. And when you're talking about a pivot, and you're a pivotal situation, so you've been out since 2014. So what's that, 9 years now?
Yeah,
So you've been in lots and lots of different jobs,
yeah.
and kind of finding out who you are, that kind of stuff. What is it you're looking for now?
It just, account management, kind of sales engineering roles, kind of technical management of sales accounts. I enjoy that. I enjoy the analytical side of it. I enjoy the sales side of it. I enjoy engaging with people and building relationships. That's really what I kind of value. So account management kind of fits all those boxes. It kind of works towards all my strengths. But that in itself, can be quite difficult to get the kind of staff you may need to
Yeah.
then build the right kind of experience you need. Doesn't mean that it's impossible. The roles are out there. You just got to find them and interview well at the time.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to take into account is you don't know who you're up against. Well, you might do if you're a LinkedIn Gold subscriber and you can see who's applied for the role.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how they're interviewing. You don't know what they're saying. You don't really know what kind of their experience is. So
Yeah.
just trying to understand that there's something out there for you, and it will happen. Just stay positive and just stay committed.
Yeah. Have you spoke to Ben Reed at Redeployable?
I followed some of his posts. He's actually doing some interesting stuff. I think he's got a tech launch that he's just kind of doing at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that I'd like to engage with. I've been speaking to quite a few really good recruiters. Don't get me wrong, there are some really bad recruiters out there. I'm not scared to say that because I've dealt with quite a few. They're the kind of people who will say they're going to call you and they just won't call you. It's not that they're sending an email, rearranging the call. They're just, for whatever reason, fobbed you off. If you're not going to call me, I'm not going to cry, right? But just let me know. Don't say you're going to do something if you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some great ones. LinkedIn is an absolute tool for good. You can't not mention things like the gender. In there, you will find really good people. And it's those kind of forums and those kind of places where, I believe at the moment, I don't know this to be an absolute truth, but I think there's more support for you when you leave the forces than when you're actually in the forces. It seems that way with everything, the whole veteran community, the way you can develop yourself personally with all the support, financially. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. I'll have to. I've chatted to one of the guys who works at Redeployable, I think. But ultimately, you kind of leave people your details, and you have a little brief chat, and then what? You kind of wait for them to get back to you. At what stage do you then re-engage and say, right, okay, I'm still here. I'm still kind of looking.
Well, I would re-engage with them. I imagine that they're very busy. I know they've just got their team back together. And I would be having a conversation with them because they're looking for people like you.
Yeah.
People with a bit of a dynamic, people, especially with your sales background and things like that. They would definitely be interested in at least having that conversation. So
yeah,
I would, if you're not linked with Ben, but if you're saying you're seeing these posts, you must be, or let's hope you are, and then just send him a little message and get a call going because he is doing some good work. But moving forward from that, you sent me an email, a while back, just talking about a few things that perhaps you went through, things that you've been discussing with other ex-forces. I like to call people ex-forces, not veterans, because clearly a veteran's a very old person that can't work anymore, that kind of stuff, or at least that's how I see it. You came up with a few interesting points that I just want to kind of discuss that might really enhance retention, might help people get back into the military just like you did, a little bit quicker, because we've got all kinds of problems with that, and I'm sure the military would like to hear some of them. You talk about the 4 to 6 year point being a pinch point. You also talk about the 12 to 13 year point being a pinch point. So what is that kind of, what's that about? What are you saying there? Because I've got some different headings written down about the reduced sign off, time, the rejoin pathway, things like that. Now I'm happy for you to go on send and talk about this, and I can give my point of view and things like that. But I guess if you can remember what you put, I'm sure you can. Just give me a little bit of information about what it is your thoughts are there.
Obviously, I've witnessed. Obviously, I've left twice myself, and I've noticed a lot of other people who've left around me. Some for loads of different reasons. It's never ever going to be like a one size fits all approach. It's unique to each individual.
Yeah.
So, and did notice, obviously, there's a difference between correlation and causation, but I did notice at certain points people were more inclined to leave, and that was like the 4 to 6 year point, which was me. I left at the 6 year point. From the army, a lot of people I know have left at that kind of early point, and also the 12 to 13 year point. But I'll hit the first demographic kind of first. So that 4 to 6 year point, and it's specifically people who joined straight from school, like I did. I'm not sure about when you joined, John, but I joined straight from school, and I was 17. And so after kind of 4 to 6 years service, you're around about what, 21, 22, 23. And there's one thing that I know for sure, and I do know this, is that the person you are at 17 walking through the doors of the recruitment office is not the person that you are at 21, 22, 23. You've changed so much. Your outlook. And there's one thing that the Forces is really good at, is developing its personnel. They're absolutely outstanding at it. You'd expect that as well. And so it creates these absolute balls of potential who, at the 4 to 6 year point, have spent the most formative years in the Forces being shaped and molded. Look at that as a pool of talent to draw from, right? So, you've got all these people leaving. Some of them are absolutely amazing managers and leaders of the future, and they're slipping through your fingers. And that's the criminal part about this, is that they're going, because after that period of growth, imagine, you're looking at your life, and you may have gone through those doors into the recruitment office at 17 and been streamed somewhere by a very effective recruiter. You've gone into somewhere where they're undermanned. You might not actually have suited, you might have suited a different role, but you didn't know that at 17. All you had was the will to serve, but you know that at 21, 22, 23. You may know where you want to go. You may have a really good idea of who you are as a young person, and really a good idea of what you want to do. So it's tapping into that potential. Now, not everyone is going to be an absolute ball of potential at that point in their time. People flourish at loads of different points in their life. People like plants, aren't they? Certain plants need different amounts of shade, different amounts of sun, and it's just environmental. So people develop at a different time. But what you can do is you can think, okay, we're going to lose some of these people anyway. But imagine if at that point you invested in people. Imagine if you invested them in this way. Imagine if you looked at those people. Imagine if you had a branch or a group of people whose job it was to look at this pool of talent and think, okay, these are potential managers and leaders of the future. Okay, we either lose them, as in they're going to go, or we invest in them. And that, for me, is a pathway to higher education. Now, I came from a lower socioeconomic background, John. University was never on the cards for me. You were looking at apprenticeships, you were looking at factory jobs, you were looking at whatever. But imagine how many of these young people that you've got who've spent 4 to 6 years in the Forces. You've got a really good handle on who they are. They've got that character that you need. They've got that integrity, that moral fiber that you need. They've got all those soft skills that you need as an effective manager and leader. And you can invest in that. Now, it's important to look at these people and know that they do get developed like that in the Forces now. I've seen it. But it's more often than not the people who are already academically ready for uni. Okay, look at the people who aren't. Look at the people who may need a bit of work. I don't know how that could come about, the actual process. It could be a year or two working with the education centre, an hour or two a week of their own time putting into the qualifications that they need to attain to then allow them to go to university. Imagine if you did that. And imagine if you're investing like that in people. That in itself, just the byproduct of that is that person feels valued. And so then what that talent pool, what that can do, that can lead into other areas further down the line where you may be on demand. So that's just one thing that I feel that you could do with that kind of talent pool. These young people who are 21, 22, 23, who are just exiting the Forces, and it's such a waste. It is. And then, what could you do?
First of all, Matt, why do you think they're leaving at that point, though?
because it comes to for me, you grow, right? And your values, okay, just align in a different way.
Just value.
But with the forces, not just your values, those your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. You may want something more. You may like be in the situation that I was in. You may be posted in Germany for 15 years, and you may think that's not for me. You know, that was a huge driver behind the reason that I didn't want to stay in, was because of that extended draft in Germany. Now I know things like that have changed now, and they don't have as many units who were drafted abroad like that for such a long time. But that was a reality back then. Is it different now? I don't know. I've got no relevant experience. But you know, just where I think it could be relevant is that you're still looking at these young people as talent that's readily available for the forces to utilise. As maybe it just comes down to flexibility, the flexibility to be able to look at people and know that it's retention can't just be a win-lose statistic. We won, we kept them in, we lost, they're gone. Look at it as retention, as investing in people, no matter who they are. Just invest in these people. And the byproduct of that is creating value in people who may have just left. And those young people that leave, they do really well outside the forces and they exceed all expectations. Because they will, but they could do that inside the forces. They may not just be in the place where they're able to do that. So I think being flexible and allowing that lateral movement, opening up branches, allowing higher education can help massively. I may be wrong. You could listen to this thinking, what qualifies him to have that opinion? Ultimately, nothing. But I'm from the outside looking in. I've kind of lived it. And if this seems appealing to me, who else does it seem appealing to? Could there be a young person sat there who's doing really well in the forces? They're coming up to the 5-year point, but they know you've developed them in such an effective way, in such a good way, that they know what they're worth, that they know that they can achieve more, but they may not be academically viable for higher education, but they might have that mindset. They've got that mindset. And so work with that, utilize it.
So are we saying at the 4-year point, because ultimately you don't get your funding till a lot longer than that?
Yeah, exactly.
So we're saying one of the ways you could retain them, or you're saying one of the ways you could retain them, is by giving them early intervention education at a higher level.
And I think, sorry.
But so what's the knock-on effect with that? They do that, but they have to stay.
Well, no, I think they would have to. You couldn't just look at people who were going to leave to do that. But by applying this initiative across the board and having the right kind of people looking at it, the right kind of people looking at people's careers, and I'm not just talking about a branch manager who is absolutely snowers, and you have your career interviews, and they've got 101 other commitments to do. And actually, a group of people, much like the education branch, where you've got educators whose job is to educate, these people are geared towards looking at the talent that's inside the forces and how to develop it. And even if you end up with a handful of people, look at the future, right? How many times have you had a posting or a draft where you might be on the edge, you might be thinking, okay, I'm not really sure if the forces is for me, and through no other way you've been able to describe this, your boss is a complete helmet, right? And that's it. That is the deciding factor for you. You go to the JPA terminal and you sign off. Now imagine if part of retention was aimed at trying to create really effective and good managers and good leaders. So this maybe didn't happen as much. I'm not saying it's a massive deciding factor, but it certainly has been the case for a lot of people I've spoken to. So by highlighting this talent pool early on, by developing it, by growing it, and yes, it's going to take money to thrive. You're going to have to create these pathways. But we just look at the problems we've had lately with recruitment and diversity of recruitment, of how difficult it's been to find people from certain backgrounds. Well, you've got a load of people in the forces, a load of young people with bags of talent who might not be ready academically on the surface, but they've got what it takes inside to be able to achieve that potentially. Sit down with them, speak to them. Imagine if you've been offered that opportunity when university wasn't even on the cards for you. Imagine how that would open you up as a person. And yes, there would be some return of service. And yes, that could feed into other areas where you're short. So look at that talent pipeline, manage it well, manage it how a recruitment team would, an in-house recruitment team at a large organization.
Yeah. Well, management's important because I know there is cores who have put a lot of money into qualifications, upskilling, that kind of stuff, and it's failed. But it'll be to do with the management of it and what actually the next steps are, I would imagine, because you can give people all the quals you want. What they do with them and how that translates into their military service is really important, because it doesn't matter what you give them or what qual they get. If they then don't go on to use them, what's the point? You're just wasting your money.
Yeah. Do you know what? I understand that, but it all comes down to support, and it's one thing that the forces hopefully is getting right, and that's supporting people. And there's one thing that you highlighted in one of your posts, was that when you go around to the units and you're speaking to officers at whatever level, junior, senior, or the senior NCOs or the junior NCOs, right, there is massive support for the people around them. You know, that team, you won't break them up. They're real tight knit organisations. But you said there's a disconnect there between how valued people feel. So that support, not just providing, I'm not just talking about providing qualifications, you're providing a career pathway and all the support that comes with that. You're providing someone with a potential future career. And this is why sitting down with people, getting to know them, speaking to them, taking them for a coffee, grabbing them at lunch, taking them for lunch, and genuinely understanding what it is that makes people tick. Yeah, it's going to take money, but I know they've got money to throw at it, because you can see it. They throw money at it when the horse is bolted. You'll see branches in crisis. You'll see retention bonuses, 20, 30 grand retention bonuses being thrown out for 2 to 4 years return service. And the only people taking them are the people who are staying in. So you're throwing good money after bad. I just don't, I don't think in good faith that you could argue that investing in young people like that, like I've suggested, is in any way a bad thing. What I think it would be, I think it would be a case of, maybe, okay, what are you doing right now, and how's that working out for you? If I was an organization, and the forces is an organization, if you had that kind of data to go from, 2007 to now, how valued people feel has slowly declined since then. That's like over 15 years. Mate, that's a shocking statistic, right? I'd be absolutely nailing those exit interviews. I'd be wanting to know exactly what is going on. And you know what? What you're doing right now, is it working for you? If it's not, you need to make changes. And creating value in people is never going to be a bad thing. And people may argue, oh, it's a waste of money to give qualifications. They might just leave anyway. But it's never a waste of money to invest in people, to understand people. And don't forget, right, these people have been in the forces. So you've got all their reporting periods to look back over. You can speak to their bosses. You can speak to their, the people who are in their circles, people who know them. The skill to be able to identify talent like that, it's a skill in itself. So it would need to be dedicated people or a dedicated team that do that.
Yeah, and I think you're right there, because I was an RCMO, and I speak to RCMOs all the time. The biggest problem for an RCMO is, first of all, they've probably not done anything you're talking about, and secondly, they've never been in Civvy Street, so they don't know what the pull to Civvy Street is.
Yeah.
But I do see your point of, maybe, I don't know what the exact percentage of people leaving in the first 4 to 6 years is, but I think it's around 60%.
Right.
So people who join the military have pulled a pin by that 6-year point. So 60% of them, that's quite a high percentage.
Yeah.
So when you're looking, your educational way might be a way of keeping them, but that's a high amount of people, and you can see why.
I'm not saying you're going to stop churn, right? Churn is a natural thing in business, okay?
But not that high.
But, well, I mean, how big is the organization? As a percentage of people, how big is that percentage? I mean, maybe that's one way to look at it. But you're not going to cure that kind of churn overnight. But what you can do is you can try and make sure that at least some of those people who are leaving, some of the really good people, are offered a different pathway. And the ones that choose to take it and choose to engage, that's a win. And you're not looking at perfection. You're not looking to change that 60% down to 0. That's never going to happen. Small steps in the right direction every day is how you've got to look at things, I think.
Well, educational incentive. It's interesting. Because I think I suppose the opposite side of it is how much money can they make in Civvy Street over educational incentive. I imagine most people who leave at the 4 to 6 year point leave because they're not enjoying it. Some will be because there's the dynamic of family, things like that. But the majority will be just because they'll say it's shit. That's how a younger person sees it, and the reality of
Yeah.
what that problem is. And then you've got that kind of pull of, well, I'm on 23 grand. In Civvy Street, I can get at least 35. I'm now at that age. I've got that experience. I've done this. I've done that, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got all these kind of different dynamics, but it would be interesting to understand how many would stay with the incentive of higher education. And then you could put a time on that, which then starts to get them towards that 9-10 year point, of which it's not worth leaving before 12 years.
Yeah.
Because there's an incentive there to get
Yeah.
£12,000. So in theory, the way that a lot of people stays in the military or stay in the military is because there's an incentive. And a lot of those incentives have been removed, which makes your point quite poignant. If there's no incentive at the beginning to stay, well, people just won't stay. If you've then got no incentive to then stay any longer, to the 6 to 10 year, no one's going to stay.
Yeah.
So having good incentive points along the way would aid retention without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Which brings us nicely to the 12 to 13 year point, because what we've got there is people saying, well, actually, I'm going to have to do another double of what I've just done, another 10, 12 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's going to make me stay then? So
Well,
that's the next pinch point, isn't it?
So, I mean, the people at that stage, and this is just my opinion, but like you've said, right, look, they know what their job is. They've been around, they've got a few t-shirts, okay? They know what their job's going to entail. You know, there generally aren't many surprises at that point, you know, with regards to your job, what it entails, your roles, your responsibilities. And so it's at that point that people are kind of in two camps, I feel. One is you want family time. Family time's a driver, okay? And you're never going to be able to compete with that. Being at home every night of the week, every weekend, right? You can't compete with that. Those people are going to grow. They've learned. They know what they're about. You know, family comes first, and they will leave. You know, good on them. You know, this isn't a success or fail thing from the forces point of view. They've given you 12, 13 years good service, right? They want to change, and they're going to go. And you know, welcome that, welcome it. Send them on the way. You know, with a positive feeling. And you know, you never know. You know, these people have got opinions. These people have got social media accounts. What they think of the forces matters. They may have family members, young people who want to join the forces. Oh, what do you think, Uncle Harry? Oh, well, actually, I've got a positive experience of the forces. I've got negative. I generally think it's going to be positive. But you know, I've got lots of thoughts on this, but generally, kind of, if you're gonna look at retention and try and cure retention, that 4 to 6 year point is key. At this point, I feel all you can do is kind of, if somebody knows what their job is about, can you open up the forces? I mean, the forces is a big place. There are loads of jobs. Are you really bored in what you do? Have you spent 12 years doing the same thing over and over again, and you just are absolutely threaders with it, and you want to change? Would that change then keep you in? Because you engage for another 2, 3, 4 years, and then you absolutely might as well stay until you retire. So could it be, and I'm not just saying that that all these options should be just open up forces, allow branch transfers, right? But you've lost these people already. They've signed off. Okay, let's just look at those people. You know, they're through with it. Maybe look at their deployment history. If they're saying that time is an issue, look at how much time they spent away over the last 3 years. Now, you know, we know that there are jobs in the forces that have different kind of deployment commitments. Some roles that people are in the UK a lot more than others. Is it possible that you could just engage that person and just keep them in a little bit longer if you allow them some lateral movement? Don't look at branch transfers as losing somebody. Look at a branch transfer is that you've let somebody grow and realise that their last half stint in the forces could be something that adds value to them. That may not be something that you could achieve. You know, you may have lost these people altogether. But generally speaking, you know, these people, their mindset, you know, you're going to have to try hard, I think, to retain these people. But I think allowing that flexibility, and again, this comes down to how flexible the forces is going to be. Maybe allowing that flexibility would allow people to again let their values align and let what they feel important align. because I saw it in the army. People were wanting to leave. They put them on a recruitment team for 2 years. They'd love it. They were at home, all that kind of stuff, and then they'd still leave. And so you kind of think, okay, are those kind of drafts, those kind of handholdy kind of drafts working? Probably not. Change somebody's completely, change their entire environment, change the entire place. Now I realise this could probably only be done in certain situations, and you could only move across to certain things. But again, it's not about curing churn. It's not about stopping everybody leaving. You're not going to. But can you retain a few people in essential posts? Can you retain those people who are good managers and good leaders?
Well, that does happen.
Yeah,
certainly when I was there, there was the ability to change service. It was clunky. In fact, it was very clunky. Now, many of the changes I seen were from maybe the younger generations, though, so it probably meant a retrain. So you can see how that could cause problems and things like that. However, if we're looking at 12-year plus, are we suggesting now we're looking at managers? Now, do we need so much trade when we're managers? Because how much of this trade do you actually need to know? So in theory, what we could have is what you're saying is this cross-pollination. So let's just say if we took, I don't know, Sergeant to W1. Realistically, it's a management aspect. We should be managing at that point. I think Sergeant maybe still needs to perhaps know a little bit more about trade as they manage the guys on the ground. But as you're coming into your warrant officer mode and stuff like that, you're managing really. Now, so does it really matter whether you're in the RAF, the Royal Navy, or the Army? If you're managing people, why does it matter? And what you would actually do there is you would open up locations everywhere. Now, you're suggesting, and it's right, is that most people at that age have got a family now. The dynamic is, I don't want to be away from home. I get it all the time from everybody who's leaving. That's their reason, really. Or they've come to the end of service. But the majority reason is, I don't want to be traveling. Well, the reason people are traveling is because there's no option. So if we open up all the services and say, well, you're there, you don't want to be there, you're signing off. But actually, if you transferred over to the RAF, there's actually 3 positions over here. All of a sudden, you're giving people the posting they want. They're in management. They're still the same rank and they've got a chance to go further. So I think there could definitely be a look at how you cross-pollinate management.
Yeah.
That could easily be done.
It's that flexibility, well, it raises a question, how flexible can the forces be? But I think that probably one of the really important questions is how can they afford not to be flexible? In the current state of affairs, I'm not relevant. I don't know what's happening at the moment inside, but looking at these and other things as well, like we touched on, making it easier for people to leave. Now I've had this conversation with my friends loads, and they kind of say, well, that's counterintuitive. Like making it easier for people to leave, how will that help retention? But again, I said, stop looking at retention as in this win-loss battle. So at the moment, you sign off on JPA. I did it. You sign off on JPA, you've got 12 months to go. Now, 12 months to be somewhere where you don't want to be, that's a long time. And psychologically, it's a battle in itself. I've spoken to civilian counterparts, and they can't believe that you've got to give a year's notice, and it's difficult. And a lot of people, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of people, it creates a really negative mindset for them, and they don't behave in a way that maybe is as productive as it could be. And what it also does is a lot of people don't kick into gear until it's really too late. So kind of thinking, they're kind of like, oh, I'm about to start my resettlement, and I'm about the transition needs to start before that. Really, I think personally, especially with regards to mindset and all the prep that you can do. Now, just imagine this, John. Imagine if instead of 12 months, it was 9 months. Okay, and maybe this can only apply to the 4 to 6 year group because they've had the least amount of resources put into them, and they're generally not going to be a senior rate or senior rank, whatever you want to be. And so what that does is then imagine you're at the JPA terminal, you sign off, It's a reduction of 3 months from the forces point of view. But for the person sat there, it's only 6 months real time military service left before you're in resettlement or that termination phase. So that in itself is a much more tangible thing. It's a much more easier thing to compute in your head and to see and to visualize and to break down. And I think it's just a good call to action. And having 6 months real service left, it could help create a positive mindset. It could help create just an easier start to a difficult journey for a lot of people. And then, when you're in your last 3 months, you're hitting it. And then, imagine then alongside this, right, you're leaving and you've got a letter. And this, again, is only specific to the 4 to 6 year group. You've got a letter or certificate. We love certificates, don't we? Put it in your downstairs toilet. It's something to look at. And what that says is look, we know that you're going. We don't want you to. Okay. If for the next 3 years, if you want to rejoin, you can rejoin as all these different trades, and it's applicable to you. It's applicable to your skill set. Obviously, it relies on certain conditions and criteria being met. But that 3 years from a young person, bearing in mind you've joined straight from school, bearing in mind that person has left at the 4 to 6 year point. A lot of these people are going outside. Now, at this point, the first 3 years of your transition is ultimately kind of, maybe let's call that an important period, because you're transitioning at that point. You're still growing. You're still going through that period of growth. You're learning things. You're hopefully paddling your own canoe. You're having your own experiences. You're learning from your own path, which way is right to go. And so maybe 18 months into you leaving, you're sat at home and things aren't going right for whatever reason. And you're looking at your certificates in downstairs blue, or you're looking at your letter, and it says, we don't want you to go. We want you back. And because you only had to be somewhere where you didn't want to be for 6 months instead of that year that you're picturing in your head, the process of you leaving wasn't as negative. You didn't have 12 months to polarize those negative feelings that you have towards the forces. Instead, it was actually quite short. 6 months goes by in a flash, and then you're in your resettlement. So you sat there with this positive mindset that you've got because you only had 6 months to go in the forces. And you go into the recruitment office because you've decided that, leaving wasn't right for you. And, somebody reaches the hand out, they take your letter, they say, welcome back. I know it can't be as easy as that, but the premise, the concept behind it, of people feeling valued, of people feeling like they haven't just left somewhere, they don't feel resentment towards the forces. Don't treat people differently when they sign off. Now, I'm not saying that this happens, and it probably can't officially, but we all know, we've all been there. Extra duties, the light duties that you always seem to get, you can't get the same kind of AT. Who wants to send someone on an adventure training who's signed off? Get them on duties. I'm not saying that happens, but it does.
Yeah.
And so, let's just assume that by valuing people, that you're making them feel valued. And by understanding what growth is in an individual means that we're confident enough as an organization to know that, for everyone that leaves, there's a chance that people might come back. Let's try and increase that chance. Let's try and increase that likelihood.
Yeah. Well, I've got another look at that. I think I agree with you with the time. As in, I don't think we need that much time at the end. I think when you have a huge time scale, you create an environment that tells everybody that you're going to solve that for them. So, for example, if you give someone 12 months and say, we're going to send you on a career transition partnership, we're going to look after you when you leave, we'll square it away. No one's ever going to look to the future, because they're just going to go through the military service, and at some point they'll go, I'm going to sign off, and then they'll go, the military and CTP are looking after me. So what you actually get there is a lot of negativity, not just because of the military, but because that system's quite difficult to manage. And people who are leaving the military might sign off on the 1st of September, but they don't actually get their the sign off, if you like, from whoever's their desk manager, whatever, until February. So all of a sudden, they've only got 6 months left. So they've lost all that time anyway.
Yeah.
So would it not be easier to translate the ownership from the military back to the individual? So what we do is from the first day, we teach them that they're going to leave. So we give them their education, we give them all these things, and we kind of cement in their mindset that actually a longer service is probably going to do you good. That helps retention. Now, you can leave whenever you want, but that's your ownership. And it wouldn't be ideal to leave in the first for 4, 5, 6 years because you haven't gained that experience yet. You haven't got your qualifications that you're talking about. All that kind of good stuff. But when the ownership lies at the individual, there'll be way less chance that they're all signing off. Because in the back of the mind, they're thinking, no, I've got to mature here. I've actually got to get this right. I've got to start looking first. I've got to understand it, who I am. All these kind of things. And when you give them education, when you give them these qualifications, when you mature them, when you help them in their career, that's the value you're after.
Yeah.
And so I think what you would end up getting would be people who wanted to leave after 4 years would probably last till 6, 8 years. Then you would get people who would go on to 12, and then you would go on to people who would go past that 14, 15, 16-year point and then can't leave because there's an incentive of a pension. All these kind of things. So I really believe, and I get all of these different things where they can come back in quicker. I think that's it's a necessity. You can get back in, but again, it's clunky. I've looked at that myself, and I kind of thought, I don't even know where I'm supposed to start with it, which means a lot of people who think the same will not bother.
Yeah.
So we do need, do you know what? I signed off a year ago, but you can come back in within 2 weeks. You know, that'd be really quick. That's bang. It doesn't give the person chance to change their dynamic. It's the same as taking an 18-year-old into basic training. If you spend a year getting them through the process, that their life changes.
Yeah.
If they sign up on a Thursday, and by the way, by the next Sunday, you're in Basenborn doing phase 1, then all of a sudden you're getting all these people coming through. They haven't got a chance to leave. They haven't got a chance to change their mind, and you have this increase of people. But then you start to filter through that they are valued. Listen, we know you're going to leave. We don't know whether it's going to be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 35 years yet. No one knows that. Your personal dynamic, what's going on in your life, your future is going to be your future. But right now at 18, we don't know that. So what we're going to do is we're going to invest in you. We're going to make you feel valued. We're going to allow you higher education. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. We want you to stay for a long time and use these skills and quals to make the military better and to progress as an individual yourself.
Yeah.
When the day comes to leave, that's your ownership. So from this day forward, you need to be looking at what that is. And what you'll do is you'll change the mindset of everybody in the military. And very, very quickly, people will stay longer because actually the problem's theirs. Whereas at the minute, it's not theirs. And it gives them something to blame. Now, the biggest problem for retention is veterans. Shitpost. Because social media. Now, in the past, veterans, I don't like to call it that, I keep doing that, but ex-forces, I keep saying, in the past, apart from word of mouth, nobody could really say, oh, I've had a shit time in the military, or I've had a really bad time. The military is really bad. Now, one person has a bad time and the whole world knows because of social media. But the people who are doing that have left. So some of the things you're saying make really good sense because when you create a positive vibe and they all leave thinking it was amazing, then the negativity doesn't exist. And the transition becomes a positive transition, knowing that you're in control of yourself. It's relatively short, but you know you're going to be a success and everybody's going to just let you leave. Whereas at the minute, there's so many gaps and there's so many problems that ultimately the person is stagnating.
The only
when
thing
you stagnate and leave, you will find it negative.
Yeah. The only thing that I feel about that is that when there's a kind of shift of accountability, that there isn't any kind of like, brushing your hands and thinking, right, it's nothing to do with me now, it's all on them. As long as there's still an element of realization that it's both parties that need to commit to personal growth to development to all these things. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
It
you
just
get your
sounded as though,
personal
like,
growth through your job.
yeah,
If
but
you're signed up to that, then we're going to give you personal growth. If you want to leave, then that's your choice.
yeah,
We're going
yeah,
to help you grow and we'll help you leave because we're going to
right,
do that through your service.
yeah,
That's the investment.
right,
Once you're gone, you're gone.
yeah,
No other business in the world does what the military does. So if you serve for 20 years in the police, they don't do anything. Why? Because they just see it as your normal progression into life. If you work for 20 years for Marks and Spencers or Boots or any business,
yeah,
when you say you're leaving, you're gone. So why is it different for military people? The reason is we've got a big stopgap that says once you hit here, we'll square it for you. But that's not exactly what we do. We just put them in that area and then we forget about them, like you were saying, and give them extra duties and make it a pain in the arse. And we give them all this time to get negative and
yeah,
stagnate and not enjoy life.
yeah.
And then they all leave and transition's rubbish.
And they're the people that you've talked about on social media.
And them are the people who are saying it. So those people, everyone who leaves with a negative, and I left on a negative, not because I didn't like the military, simply it was because the irony is I was an RCMO and I couldn't get a posting shorter than 7 hours away from where I lived. But the reason I was negative, because the last 12 months, I had 20 odd years, amazing time. Them 20 odd years, for a period of time, I forgot. All I
Yeah,
cared about now was
yeah,
how I felt now. So that was what I was going to talk about. I wasn't going to go, I've had an amazing time, but I'm really mentally not really stable now, because I wasn't going to talk about all my great times. I'm going to talk about how I feel.
yeah,
That's got to change. And that will only change if you give the responsibility to the individual, because they'll leave when it's right. They'll leave when they're ready. So if they get to a certain point and they think, actually, I want to leave, but I'm not quite ready, they will continue to progress. And you're still helping them getting that further education, that qualifications, giving them more leadership, management, all these great things that we do in the military. And I think you'd change a lot. Not only that, you'd save hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds on a transition that doesn't work. And you can give it back to the through service piece, which solves your problem of funding for education.
I'm down with that. I think just valuing it's something that's been done in City Street, and it's
Yeah.
really easy to make people feel valued. It is really easy, and the forces is like you've said, it is different, right? But ultimately, it's an organisation. You know, would that happen on City Street? Not for very long. It would absolutely break the company who had that kind of negative kind of culture, because it must have a negative culture if people don't feel valued. And like you've said about people being negative on social media, you can like stifle people's opinions. Okay, people don't have opinions, and discussion is good, but there should be a balance.
Yeah.
But for all the people that have something negative to say, imagine if these people have negative things to say. Imagine if they also came out with some things that they think could help. Like some, and I'm not just saying, oh, we should do it like that, we should do it like this, but the actual processes and mechanisms that can help us make a difference, put them down, because opinions are really important. And just because you might not have held some real high position in the military, absolutely does not mean that you don't have anything positive to add to the conversation.
No.
Far from it.
No.
You look at the Gender Network. Chris Shaw, Chris Kirk came outside and through a really altruistic, kind of feeling and want what they knew that they didn't have certain elements of support available to them, and they wanted to provide that support, and they did, and they've done it really, really well. And so if that's happening outside of the forces, let's see it happening inside. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, they've all got their own LinkedIn pages. It's easy to create a video of a fighter jet flying across somewhere, or a Challenger crashing across the Salisbury Plain. But let's highlight some of the positive things that you're doing, some of the positive processes that you're doing to make people valued. Let's see it, show us.
Well, military people, everyone in the world really talk about the negative rather than the positive. Very few people, if you go onto Glassdoor and you go onto these different websites that have the opportunity to comment,
Yeah.
the majority will always be negative because people find it easier to comment negatively. People don't like to say good things. Going back to your two Chris's and that, they came through the FTG during their time. and then they've set up the Gender Network, which is all great, because I think that we need lots of different elements, but we all need to collaborate, because that can be confusing as well. So in theory, what we end up giving the end user is the same problem as CTP are given now, where people are going to go there and expect it to happen for them. Whereas the way that I see it, and the way that I think the future is, if the Forces Transition Group, for example, ran through service, so we're an outside agency, and we were a bit of a PDR, you know, I think PDR was great. I think it was 30 years ahead of its time, but it failed because it was tried as internally fed. So the people monitoring it would be troop sergeants, troop staff sergeants, that kind of stuff.
Right.
That won't work when you're not leaving, because then people who are there are going to say, well, why do I need to do that? The culture in the military isn't that one day I will leave. However, if the culture becomes one day I will leave, then everybody's PDR will be amazing. And that's how it would have worked. I wouldn't be sitting here if PDR had it been done correctly or had it been managed correctly. It was just misunderstood, because military folk who haven't signed off at the minute do not understand the emotion of leaving.
Yeah. Well, you don't need it, do you? Because you're staying in. You know, that's the captive audience that you've got. But you don't know. You don't know.
But that's the culture. You don't need it because you're staying in. That's the wrong culture.
Yeah.
Because absolutely you do. You're talking about higher education.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we absolutely do need it whilst we're staying in.
But it's that mindset. It's that mindset that you're in. You know, you're going to.
You can't change that unless you teach you from week one.
Yeah.
Because you can tell all the warrant officers and all the colonels and all the generals in the world, right, this is what needs to happen. They're finished. They're ahead of the game. They don't care about that stuff. They're all going to be leaving at some point. And they're looking to feather their nest. They don't care about all these people. But if you make it a mindset and give them the ownership from day one, they would absolutely care all the way through, because it's about them as much as it is about all those that are leaving as well. And I think it's a really interesting concept, but, you know, they have written a JSP, Matt, to finish that states a lot of this.
Right, okay.
It was written in 2013, actually. I think it was published about 2017, but
it's still relevant.
It's about the holistic approach of transition.
Okay.
And it states all of the things that we're talking about, that you've got to value people, and the Richard Branson comment and all that kind of stuff, you know, train your people to leave and then they'll stay.
Right.
That kind of stuff. It's all mindset. But in the military, I think sometimes we look upon it as, if I make these great people and tell them, do you know, one day you're going to leave, they will all leave. Actually, no, they won't. What you can do is change the mindset to say you need to be the top class individual by doing all these different things and getting yourself to this level before it is you decide to leave at whatever point that is, 8, 10, 12, 20 years.
Yeah.
Because we should always remember as well, we don't want everybody serving for 35 years. That'd be a nightmare. No one ever get promoted. We need natural people to fall out and all these kind of things. But we probably need people to stay a little bit longer than 4 years, because at 21, 22, you haven't actually got your values and standards, really, your real ones. You've been given some, but you don't know who you are yet. So giving them a bit more time, you would get more people staying. You would still get your natural churn, but actually you're getting more return for what you've put into that individual.
Yeah. I think ultimately it's understanding that growth. It's always happening. From when you're 17, 21, 22, 30, 40, 50, it never stops. You know, your values are always changing. It's the flexibility that maybe the forces, if they could have that flexibility to apply changes like we've talked about, you're not going to see a drastic change. But hopefully what you are going to do is ensure that, you know, the future personnel in the forces are the right kind of people, and they add to that kind of positive environment. Thanks for your chat today anyway, John.
No, mate, it's been fantastic, and I think we've just done 60 minutes, so people will find this a decent listen, I imagine, on a drive or out for a run and stuff like that. It's really interesting to hear your thought process, and you know, although it's different to what I've just said at the end, what we're actually both trying to do is we're both trying to describe how we get people to where they need to be. And it's, you know, it's I look at some of the comments that you've made, and a lot of it does make sense to me, but it is a really difficult area, and you can go down so many rabbit holes. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah.
I do it all the time when asked questions. You think you're answering a question, and 10 minutes later you're somewhere else in a different country somewhere. But going back to our initial points, I hope people listen to this, and I hope there's some businesses listening to this and see the quality that you could probably, or you would most certainly bring to them.
You've mentioned that.
I implore anybody just to get in touch with you, have a conversation. Clearly, you're very educated, you speak well, all these kind of things are brilliant for business. And I'm sure there's some employers out there who would love to have the conversation. I would definitely recommend getting in touch with Ben. Make sure you come on our online job fair this month. There's some great companies on there. I'm talking to Asda just after this, so another one with good quality jobs. Sales is in about 80% of what we do. We just don't all realize it. So I'm sure you'd be a fantastic addition to any company. So I know you're busy doing lots of things, Matt. I really appreciate you coming on today and talking us through your thought process. It's really important to leave a legacy of people who have maybe not been out too long, to people who've been out 9 years, to people who've been out 20 years, because then we can learn all the different processes and whether anything's changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my opinion, nothing's changing. So we need to make sure that starts to happen, because if it doesn't, we're going to be left with nobody in the military.
Exactly. It leaves you with the question, how's that working out for you? Maybe not so well.
Yeah. So to end, thank you so much. If there's anything I can do, you know where I am, and I'm sure you'll keep in contact, and I look forward to hearing of your success soon. So I'll speak to you soon.
John.
Enjoy the sunshine, because it's nice and sunny outside, and stay safe.
Cheers. Bye now.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's Project You, Project Me. Thanks for listening in. But remember, we have a Project You, Project Me guide to self-coaching, to self-belief, and it can all be downloaded on our website. We also do the 5 fundamentals: CVs, professional writing. We do brand, we do CPD, making sure you're going in the right direction. We're also looking at your elevation, giving you 2 times the chance to set up your interviews before your first actual interview. And also we look at your financial plan, massively important for your future, for you and your family. So why not come along? Have a look. What you got to lose? It's all free. Stay safe.